For you, conscious clubbing. Now, an Australian government is proposing to make a law to make people have to give and receive verbal consent before engaging in sexual activity. Prue Goward is the Minister for Prevention of Domestic Violence in New South Wales. In the hashtag #MeTooAge, does this make perfect sense? Ms Goward makes a very good point that a verbal yes is important as those who did not actually consent may not say no, but just stay silent or freeze. Communicating verbally is very important when it comes to sex, especially for young people who are still experienced. But does anything about making it a law to give or get verbal consent bother you? Nikki,
well, there's a few problems, isn't there, right from the start? I mean, who's the witness to the conversation? If we're going to go down this road, then obviously you'll have to have witnesses on hand or paperwork or something like that, because at the end of the day, if you're making a law, who's going to be able to prove that somebody said yes or somebody said no? How's it going to work?
It's true. It would still be a he said, she said, or she said, she said, or he said situation, wouldn't it? I mean, really, it's not going to probably be that effective. I think it's good to talk about the concept of consent all around, and that, I mean, I know that is part of education now for young people, and it really needs to be more. But consent is about much more than just verbal communication. It's about a whole lot of other things, and you're in that situation. It should be very clear to anyone, when the other person is consenting and when they're not consenting. It's not just about saying yes or no. And
I do know there are some universities, Nikki, in the US that have done this sort of signed consent, form thing. But I'm just wondering how. Actually, I don't know if the research. Actually, how does it work, and would it ruin the moment in a sense, or
pulling out a form with a pen and paper would definitely ruin the moment, I think.
It's having to get just as the piece to witness it is a difficult thing.
Yeah.
No, this is not funny, but it's funny.
I know what you mean. Yeah, it's not funny at all.
No, it's not funny at all, but we've got a problem here. This is when you overthink things. So where are we going to set up tribunals disputes tribunals that deal specifically with whether or not somebody said yes or said no? I mean, there's no end to this.
It's certainly an interesting topic, that one. And a few texts for you, Gary. One says, "Go, Gary, I'm for mindlessness as well."
Good. There's one other person out there with me. Good.
There you have it. Hey, now we learned today that National MP Nicky Wagner called her Labour opponent Deb Russell, can I say this word on RNZ? Well, I suppose I can, a bitch, in Parliament's debating chamber last month. Is this okay in the cut and thrust of politics? Does this let people down, women down as a whole, and buy into the stereotype? What are your thoughts on this, Nikki, in terms of this cut and thrust of argument?
No, it's not a way for women to speak to each other, but it's not a way for humans to speak to each other. I don't think it's just a female issue. It's actually, it's just inappropriate ways for humans to communicate. I mean, as soon as someone says something like that, it shuts down any kind of meaningful conversation that you might have been going to have. Although in Parliament you do wonder how much of that is meaningful.
What's your thoughts, Gary?
Well, I agree with Nikki. It's just not a good way for anybody to talk to anybody. It's a pretty vicious sort of a word, isn't it? I mean, it's about as bad as it gets, and certainly you don't want that in the House of Parliament.
No.
They should be held to a higher standard, really, than I mean, it's not appropriate at all.
Now, there's been a lot about age. I'm 68, still working on a hill country farm and fit and eat well, and meat included. I agree with Gary, be just the age that you are. Nikki Bazan, Gary McCall, it's been fantastic to have you on the show.
Thank you, Willis.
Gary, I do recommend veggie sausages for this week's dinner tonight. You love them.
And barefoot dancing, I'll try it.
See you both later.
Cheers.
There's a new version of The Sting by Marcel Marceau. Don't know what's going on there. Anyway, tauti mai rei hoa mai, hei kōrero, kei te haere, hei kaupapa, kei te karawhiua. Welcome anyone or everyone, minus The Sting. We're still here. Tonight on Checkpoint, nurses vote to strike. Talks still hope to avert the strike. We have the latest. Another rescue operation is underway in the Thai caves. 8 boys are out, 4 boys and their football coach remain. Our correspondent is there. Boris Johnson exits over Brexit. The balancing act Theresa May hoped she'd achieved has already fallen apart. Can she survive as Tory leader and therefore as Prime Minister? President Trump's nomination for the Supreme Court. And a property developer in Auckland who showed such repeated contempt for the RMA, he's been sent to jail. All of that in The Sting at some stage coming up.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Bat and aho. Nurses say they've already compromised over pay and there's little leeway left for that now. The nurses' organisation's members have rejected the latest District Health Board pay offer. That appeared to clear the way for a nationwide strike from Thursday, although the union has been back in facilitation with the employers today at the direction of the Employment Relations Authority. But the union's chief executive, Memo Musa, says it's already compromised significantly.
10 years of underfunding, 10 years of low wage increases, 10 years of DHBs not fulfilling their commitments around safe staffing, and that's taken a toll.
Memo Musa. Facilitation began at 3 o'clock today and is scheduled to continue tomorrow, ahead of a 24-hour strike from 9 o'clock on Thursday morning. In Thailand, the rescue operation to bring the remaining trapped boys out of the Tam Luang cave has resumed. 8 of the boys have been rescued so far and they are being treated in hospital. This afternoon, authorities spoke for the first time about their condition, which they say is good, but they'll have to stay under observation for a week. CNN's David McKenzie has the latest.
They are moving towards proper food. They are happy, healthy, moving around, even talking. Crucially, they were able, those 8 boys, to meet their parents through a glass partition. It seems like they're taking all precautions, sending tests, sending vials or for testing in Bangkok, just to be sure they haven't picked up anything. But they said they don't have any fevers, so it would seem at this stage a pretty slim chance.
David McKenzie in Thailand. The Auckland Council will be taken to court over its decision to ban 2 right-wing speakers from using a council venue for a seminar next month. Last week, the Mayor, Phil Goff, said venues should not be used to stir up ethnic or religious tensions and banned Canadian speakers Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux from using the Bruce Mason Centre. The campaign, run by the Free Speech Coalition, has since raised $50,000 to bring judicial proceedings against the council. A coalition spokesperson, David Cumin, says Mr Goff's decision breached the Bill of Rights and the Human Rights Act.
We were very concerned about the decision that Auckland Mayor Phil Goff made in essentially banning 2 people from speaking based on political opinion. I think that's an extremely dangerous precedent and undermines our tolerant liberal democracy.
Free Speech Coalition spokesperson David Cumin. A New Zealand vaccinologist doesn't want parents to be concerned after the MMR vaccine was recalled in Samoa. Samoan officials have called off their MMR vaccination program after 2 infants died just hours after receiving the injection. New Zealand's Immunisation Advisory Centre's vaccinologist, Dr Helen Pertussis-Harris, says the vaccine has been used safely here for decades.
It's really disappointing when these things happen because they can sort of initiate a panic. You know, we want to reassure people that vaccines are incredibly safe. We've got lots and lots of great data. This has never happened in New Zealand. It's very unlikely to happen.
Helen Pertussis-Harris says it's important to fully understand what happened in Samoa to ensure it never happens again. An Auckland property developer who's cost ratepayers over $1 million in clean-up bills has been jailed after discharging sewage near a stream and using asbestos-contaminated landfill. Ikwo Lau, also known as Augustine Lau, is already serving a 2-month jail sentence for having native trees chopped down. Today, he had 15 months added to his sentence after earlier admitting 17 charges under the Resource Management Act and 10 under the Building Act. Judge Craig Thompson described Lau's offending as the worst case when it came to ignoring warnings from the council. According to the agreed summary of facts, Lau's offending related to 6 properties that he was managing across Auckland. A man who stole a human skull and bones from the Masonic Lodge in Nelson and said he would return them in exchange for meth has been sentenced to 9 months home detention. Caden Minto avoided prison because of steps he's made to turn his life around. The 27-year-old had earlier pleaded guilty to a charge of burglary and another of blackmail. Judge David Ruth said in the Nelson District Court this afternoon there was hope Minto would reform.
And that you can put the other life you've led behind you. Certainly if you were to relapse into methamphetamine or any other drug use again, I think your aspirations and those of your fiancé would be forlorn.
Minto was sentenced to home detention at his fiancé's mother's home. A skull and crossbones are Freemason symbols used in candidate initiations. It's 5 minutes past 5. Sport. New Zealand's top doubles player Michael Venus will play on centre court at Wimbledon for the first time tonight. It's the second straight year Venus has made the last 8 at the All England club, this time with South African Raven Klaasen. They play fifth seeds Jamie Murray of Britain and Bruno Soares of Brazil. Venus, who won the doubles title at last year's French Open, is excited at the prospect of finally getting to play on the hallowed court.
It's very cool. Could be the greatest court there is to play in tennis. You know, I've watched it so many times on TV and seen all the legends playing on it, so to be able to go out there and play on that court, I'm really excited and looking forward to it. Michael Venus. The former Newcastle United defender Stephen Taylor has signed with the Wellington Phoenix for the upcoming A-League football season. A veteran of 194 English Premier League appearances, the 32-year-old is the first signing by the new coach Mark Rudin. Taylor played for Newcastle United from 2003 to 2016, with all but one of them being in the Premier League, where he forged a reputation as an industrious and reliable defender. Veteran netballer Casey Korpua is dealing with a possible career-ending injury. The former Silver Ferns captain will miss the remainder of the ANZ Premiership season with the Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic after suffering an ankle injury, which she's expected to need 8 weeks to recover from. It's a major blow for the Magic, who are currently 4th in the competition, with the top 3 sides qualifying for the playoffs. That's the news.
Bringing the boys home.
It's been described already as like trying to get through the U-bend of a toilet, and if it's a toilet that's been flushed, it's even more difficult.
Providing a temporary home.
If you can imagine yourself what it's like to have 2 good meals, to have a safe, secure sleep, to have a hot shower.
Keeping up at home and away.
It's whether or not we want to have the war-making capability and kind of keep up with this construct of sort of our allies.
Morning Report with Giles Beckford and Guy and Espiner, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, a look at the problems Māori patients face in getting equitable access to medicines. And after 10, we meet New Zealand planetary scientist Dave Stevenson. He's involved in the Juno probe orbiting Jupiter. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met surface weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Scattered showers, some heavy with hail, easing this afternoon. Isolated showers tomorrow. Whanganui to Wellington, mainly fine, however isolated showers tomorrow north of Wellington. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, a few showers today, mainly fine tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine apart from a few showers in Canterbury tomorrow evening. For Buller and Westland, fine today apart from a few showers later in Buller. Rain tomorrow with heavy and possibly thundery falls from afternoon. For Fiordland, Otago and Southland, today showers south of the Otago Peninsula, fine elsewhere. A period of rain tomorrow with possibly squally thunderstorms, then a few showers and snow to 300 metres for a time. And the Chatham Islands showers, some heavy, possibly heavy with hail, easing this evening. Rain for a time tomorrow morning. It's 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks very much indeed, Katrina, and thank you everyone for joining us. We begin tonight in Wellington, where a last-ditch attempt at averting a nationwide strike by nurses is underway. Of course, nurses have voted to strike after rejecting the latest pay offer from DHBs, and they will walk off the job on Thursday, but the Employment Relations Authority has ordered them back into talks. Will this prevent them from taking their first strike action in 3 decades? That's far from clear, but it does now seem against the odds. Here's our health correspondent, Karen Brown.
The nurses' long-running pay row came to a head today, with union members voting by a simple majority to reject the latest pay offer from district health boards. Union leaders said turnout was high and voting close, with Kai Whakahaere Keri Nuku labelling the result a courageous step by nurses.
It's been a long journey, and certainly to expect members to go to vote in such a short time and to have such a turnaround in voting output and participation in the votes, we want to acknowledge the challenges that this has created to all our members and thank them for this courageous move.
A union leader, C. Payne, says the DHB's latest pay offer redistributed the money available for a settlement and included a plan for pay equity. She says the union had rejected a request from DHB's to return to facilitation, but was ordered to do so anyway this morning. But she says if no more money's available, it won't stop the strike.
There'll need to be additional funding put on the table from the government to be able to address and give some certainty to the things that members are requesting, and that certainty around progression and transition potentially, and dates within the collective agreement for other occupational groups, as well around implementation dates when things happen.
Across town, the top clinician at Wellington's Capital and Coast DHB, John Tate, speaking for all hospital doctors, says a nurses' strike will pose major challenges nationwide.
The strike could see the withdrawal up to 70% of our frontline health workforce. In situations that are not life-threatening, care will take longer. DHBs and nurses have an obligation to preserve life and prevent disability, but we won't be able to provide the same care in the same way.
He added DHBs estimate 6,000 to 8,000 elective procedures nationwide will need to be deferred because of the strike. To help them cope, all major hospitals are postponing non-urgent outpatient appointments and elective surgery to reduce their workload during the 24-hour strike from 7 a.m. Thursday. A Wellington Hospital nurse delegate, Erin Kennedy, says nurses haven't taken the step lightly.
It's a very hard decision for nurses to vote to take strike action. And so what we're now focusing on is the life-preserving services, keeping our patients safe.
DHB's urged nurses to think again today, saying it's not too late to prevent the disruption. But the acting Prime Minister, Winston Peters, says there's no more money.
We are saying, give us some time, and over the years, we can seriously help your profession and raise its elevation and its pay and its status in this country. But after just 6 months of budget preparations, we can't do it in that short time.
Meanwhile, both sides return to talks mid-afternoon and are expected to continue tomorrow. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Karen Brown-Aho.
And obviously, if there's any update on those talks, we will bring it to you if it happens during the course of the evening. We think that they are resuming tomorrow morning now. We head now to Thailand, a media conference this afternoon with details on the condition of the 8 boys who've so far been rescued from the caves. And the rescue party has gone in for a third time. We just confirmed that a short while ago. 4 boys and their football coach remain inside. The latest details on that shortly. But first, here's Bridget Burke on the second successful rescue mission.
An ambulance drives away from the cave entrance with its lights flashing, indicating that another boy had been saved. And then another. And another. And another. A routine that has now become a familiar and welcome sight in northern Thailand. The dangerous operation to rescue the remaining boys resumed last night, after a break to replenish oxygen supplies and make other preparations deep inside the cave complex. Once again, a crack team of foreign divers and Thai Navy SEALs braved the narrow submerged channels of Tam Luang cave system, while people around the world waited for news.
We rescued 4 more of the boys. We started our operation at 11 a.m. and around 8 p.m. all 4 were transported to hospital via air transport. They are now all safe.
13 foreign divers and 5 members of Thailand's elite Navy SEAL unit make up the main team guiding the boys, aged between 11 and 17, to safety. Wearing full face masks, which are easier for novice divers than traditional respirators, each boy is being accompanied by 2 divers who also carry his air supply. And it seems that practice makes perfect, with the rescue mission head saying that the journeys are getting quicker.
We succeeded. Like I've said, we were 2 hours faster than yesterday. We expect that with the preparations and plan discussed today, we think that we will do even better for the next mission and we will succeed 100%.
Authorities have not confirmed the identity of the 8 boys who have been rescued and are now being treated in Chiang Rai Hospital, apparently out of respect for the families whose sons are still trapped. The freed boys are being kept away from their parents due to fears they may have caught an infection while in the cave. Meanwhile, the Thai Prime Minister visited the cave to inspect the rescue operation, reportedly saying that this kind of event should never reoccur. But for now, the attention remains on the last 4 boys and their soccer coach still in the cave. Rescuers needing more than 20 hours before they can mount the next mission. And with more rain forecast, it's now a race against the clock to free them before the cave system gets flooded again and the water rises. For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
Yes, that rain is now falling quite heavily. More on that in a moment. Thai authorities held a media conference an hour or so ago with the latest on the condition of the 8 boys who are out. CNN's David McKenzie was there and I spoke to him shortly after he left it.
Well, it's remarkable, John. Those 8 boys, they're moving around, walking, talking. They've been able to eat slowly, get to solid foods. I think what was most touching is the doctor said that they asked for chocolate. They gave them chocolate. They asked for more, and the health official said, no, not so fast. You know, they've been stuck in that cave for so many days. They're going to have some health effects. But really, as they described it at this stage, very minor health effects, considering just a few issues with lung inflammation, a cold body temperature when they came out. One of the boys had a slow heart, but the way they describe it, nothing to panic about. And those boys seem incredibly in good health.
Yes, it's remarkable, isn't it? Also, we're getting some details of the kind of thing they've been saying, the kind of messages they've had for family and for, I guess, the world.
Well, that's right. You know, they are separated, but in the same zone of the hospital, in isolation as a precaution. They've been able to meet with their families through a glass partition. It's obviously really frustrating for the boys and their families, but, you know, again, they kept stressing that they were thanking everyone and the rescue efforts and the attention of the world. And they'll be there for at least a week, they said, and then presumably released from the hospital. But there are 4 more still in the cave at this hour and a coach, and that is the focus, I think, moving forward by the rescue teams. But amazing news that the boys are in good shape.
Yeah, let's go to those 4 who were still in the cave with their coach, of course. It does sound like the team has gone in again for the third lot of boys.
Well, that's right. According to our Navy source, they are in the caves now, the elite divers. We don't know exactly when they will pull them out. And, you know, John, it's tempting to think of this as routine at this point because we're now on our 3rd day of this rescue. Nothing routine at all about this incredible way that they are doing this, the cooperation between the international teams, military and civilian, and the amount that they are having to prep every night and then go in every morning. So things could go wrong. Obviously, the entire nation hoping they go smoothly. Just to give you a sense of how this has captured everyone's attention, Elon Musk, the billionaire, personally delivered his contraption to Thailand yesterday evening, met with the Prime Minister, went to the cave site, and understandably, when the Prime Minister said they asked what he needed, he said, well, maybe you can invest a little bit in Thailand. So I think there's a bit of a lighter mood here. Yeah. So very much focused on getting those boys and their coach out.
David, we so appreciate how much you've been filing for us here at RNZ because you are there for CNN. One final question before you go back to your real job, but what's the weather like?
It's raining down on my head. It has been for several hours. It's that kind of deep set-in monsoon rain that you have throughout Southeast Asia. Looking in front of me, I can see the crags of the mountain where the cave system is and a very heavy, thick cloud. It was raining heavily overnight. Now, that is a worry, but that also means that, you know, they certainly pulled the trigger at the right time or at least at the last possible time because if they can get in and get these boys out before this really sets in, that will be a huge relief, and also it really shows that their decision-making, and such brave decision-making to make that initial call to go in, was the right one. But nothing's for certain in the story. We've seen many twists and turns, and at this hour, certainly those boys are moving through that cave system, I believe, and hopefully we'll see the ambulances passing by my position in a few hours.
David McKenzie, who is CNN's man on the ground, they're filing almost constantly. The other night I wandered out of the studio during the 6 o'clock news. He was filing on CNN, and then later I saw him on TVNZ on +1. They just go and go and go, those correspondents. But it really is a remarkable story, and we will update you if there is any more. The rescue team is now in trying to bring out the final group of 4 boys. It's 90 minutes past 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ, and thank you for being with us. We head now to Downing Street, where Theresa May, never a Prime Minister for whom certainty has come with the job, faces more than usually uncertain days ahead following the resignation of Boris Johnson as Foreign Secretary. Some, perhaps including the PM herself, won't regard Johnson as much of a loss. His time in Cabinet was sometimes absent, sometimes intractable, and seldom as brilliant as Johnson himself appeared to have thought he was. But Theresa May's precarious balancing act on Brexit is now increasingly a referendum on her her leadership. As recently as last Friday, she believed she had reached a compromise on the terms of Brexit for a Tory caucus deeply divided on its merits and its application. Wrong. First, her Brexit secretary resigned, saying soft Brexit was becoming no Brexit at all. Then Boris Johnson pumped up the volume. Cue the talk of leadership, all of it being done in that most Westminster of ways.
Turning to Brexit, Mr. Speaker, I want to pay tribute to my right honourable friends, the members for Halton, Price and Howden, and Uxbridge and South Ruislip for their work over the last 2 years.
Perhaps not since Monty Python sold the dead parrot as living has an English performer quite so pointedly twisted the truth as Theresa May did when she called Boris Johnson, the MP for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, and David Davis, the MP for Halton, Price and Howden, friends. Davis is seen as having made his stand on principle. Boris Johnson's stand is viewed by many with much less charity, and Parliament did not sit in silence as the PM responded to his resignation.
And similarly, to recognise the passion that the former Foreign Secretary demonstrated in promoting
Order, a very unseemly atmosphere. I want to hear about these important matters. And I think the House should. The Prime Minister.
Thank you.
It was a day of high theatre and low politics, although earlier David Davis, the outgoing, or more particularly the outgone, Brexit Secretary, was calmly matter-of-fact on the BBC as he assessed his government's negotiating position with Brussels.
We are now proposing to use the same rule book, or the same laws really, as the European Union, not equivalent, not similar, but the same, and that will provide all sorts of problems when it comes to, if we want to diverge, do something different. So the return of control to Parliament is more illusory than it is real.
David Davis described himself as a reluctant conscript to the blueprint agreed to at Chequers on Friday. Boris Johnson's resignation as Foreign Secretary followed what had seemed on Friday, albeit hopefully a Tory consensus on Brexit, was becoming a series of own goals. The damage was coming from within, but the opposition joined in.
On Friday, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was so proud of her Brexit deal, she wrote to her MPs to declare collective cabinet responsibility is now fully restored.
Jeremy Corbyn, in the TV coverage of the debate, Theresa May herself can be seen laughing. But seconds later, the Labour leader's question distilled the issue for the Prime Minister and for her caucus.
Mr. Speaker, how can anyone have faith in the Prime Minister getting a good deal with 27 European Union governments when she can't even broker a deal within her own cabinet?
Can Theresa May answer that? Well, it depends who you ask. Speaking on the BBC's Today programme, Andrea Jenkins, one of the Conservative Party's most pro-Brexit MPs, was asked if May should stand down as PM.
Honestly, I think yes. I think that, when I was at the big Brexit party last night, the strength of feeling in the room, speaking to people as well, was that, the time has come that we need a Brexiteer Prime Minister, really.
Who would that be? Well, clearly Boris Johnson has positioned himself, his ambition provoking contempt from The Guardian. His self-regard is incontinent, just like Trump's, they wrote, and that was one of their kinder assessments. In the House, having had her tributes to Boris Johnson raucously laughed down, Theresa May moved on.
And I'm also pleased to welcome my honourable friend, the member for Esher and Walton, as the new Secretary of State for Exeter in the European Union.
And those years of affirmation were loud enough to suggest May has support, but the numbers are clearly being done. Still, the Times called Theresa May a PM no one dares kill off. Their thesis, she survives because who would replace her? Remember David Cameron, whose resignation in 2016 began with the words,
"The British people have voted to leave the European Union, and their will must be respected."
He stood down because he didn't have that respect. Pro-Remain, he gambled on a referendum result that agreed with him. And he didn't get it.
I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
2 years on and a bit, his replacement captain faces mutiny and the destination is uncertain. Jeremy Corbyn summed things up rather succinctly.
The Chequers Compromise took 2 years to reach and just 2 days to unravel.
Can the unravelling stop? Who will stop it? And what on earth must they think of this in Brussels? Isn't it an extraordinary state of affairs? 5:25. We'll have more with the latest from the BBC after 6 o'clock. What is going on with the Tories, with Theresa May and with Brexit? That's coming up in about 40 minutes. Lots of feedback coming in on the nurses' strike. This from Stuart in Palmerston. That's the Palmerston in Otago. The big question is, what have the unions been doing over the last 30 years? The question might also be asked, what has the Labour Party been doing? Have huge corporate level salaries split the workforce into well-paid elites and low-paid workers? The familiar divide and rule strategy. As always, when we cover this story, a lot of support coming in for nurses and a lot of encouragement to them from you to continue with their industrial action. Thank you for your feedback. Text us on 2101. Let's go to Samoa now, where the Prime Minister is calling for an inquiry after 2 infants died after receiving the MMR vaccine. The vaccine, which has been given to children in New Zealand for decades, of course, is used as protection against measles, mumps and rubella. Samoan officials have now recalled the vaccine following the babies' deaths. What went so tragically wrong? Well, no one knows that yet. But a New Zealand expert is warning it shouldn't put people off getting the vaccine here. Charlie Drever reports.
2 12-month-old babies died hours after they were given the MMR vaccine at Savai's Safotu Hospital last Friday. And the Director General of Health, Loesa Takinasiri, says the vaccination program has been called off.
We have requested a forensic autopsy post-mortem on the 2 babies because it's now a police case. It's now also a very different case in the health field. We need to look at the cause. We need to find out if the drug was maintained at appropriate levels.
RNZ correspondent Otagavaya Tipi Otagavaya says the government's investigation is in the early stages.
The Ministry of Health and the National Health Service are now doing an internal inquiry. They removed the nurses and other health personnel who were involved at the time of the vaccination of the babies. The police is also doing their own investigation based on the complaints filed by the families of the 2 babies, and we'll have to see the outcome of that.
Mr. Otagavaya says the nation is in shock and is searching for answers.
Everything is based now on suspicions, and they said there might be the batch was not kept in the right temperature or anything like that. But it's very premature to speculate on that until the outcome of the investigation were made public and for us to know what happened.
Back in New Zealand, Immunisation Advisory Centre vaccinologist Dr. Helen Patoussis-Harris says most issues with the vaccine don't usually arise until between 10 to 14 days after the injection.
When we see things like this occur, and very, very rarely they have in other countries, it's been because either there's been an error made in reconstituting the vaccine, so another product has been administered in error, or that there's been an issue with contamination where there's been a problem with handling.
Dr. Patoussis-Harris says MMR is extremely safe and has been used effectively in New Zealand and around the world for decades.
It's really disappointing when these things happen because they can sort of initiate a panic. You know, we want to reassure people that vaccines are incredibly safe. We've got lots and lots of great data. This has never happened in New Zealand. It's very unlikely to happen. And we also need to understand more about what did happen so we can also ensure it doesn't happen again.
She says New Zealanders should continue to use the vaccine as the risk of mumps, measles and rubella is much higher. Her view is shared by the Ministry of Health, which says it will not be recalling the vaccine. For Checkpoint, Charlie Drever.
5:29. Just before the headlines, Donald Trump has announced Judge Brett Kavanaugh is his nominee for the US Supreme Court. The 53-year-old, he's a young man, which means he could be there for a very long time, served with the George W. Bush administration and also worked as a lawyer in the Kenneth Starr investigation of President Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. Kavanaugh is favoured by many conservatives. He is a conservative and has served on the Washington, D.C. Circuit Court since 2006. He's a graduate of Yale and currently lectures in law at Harvard, and has previously argued sitting presidents should effectively face a form of immunity from criminal prosecution. The BBC's David Willis reports.
President Trump has turned the nomination of judges into primetime TV fare.
Tonight, it is my honor and privilege to announce that I will nominate Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the United States Supreme Court.
His latest nominee would give the 9-member court a clear Conservative majority for the first time in decades.
My judicial philosophy is straightforward. A judge must be independent and must interpret the law, not make the law.
Those outside the Supreme Court tonight believe Brett Kavanaugh's appointment will have profound implications for issues such as healthcare, gay rights and abortion. President Trump has vowed his appointments will bring an end to Roe v. Wade, a 1973 ruling giving women the constitutional right to abortion.
The freedom of women to make their own health care decisions, and for the protection for Americans with pre-existing conditions. Those rights will be gravely threatened.
The retirement of Justice Anthony Kennedy paved the way for the latest vacancy on the Supreme Court. Whilst Justice Kennedy was a swing vote on many of the court's decisions, many believe Brett Kavanaugh may be about to take the highest court in the land in a different direction completely.
The BBC's David Willis in Washington. You're with Check One and RNZ. We're delighted to have your company. Coming up, we're going to go to Japan, where the floods are extraordinary. It's the worst flooding the country's seen in 35 years. 140 people dead, 60 missing, 100,000 people preparing to spend another night in an emergency shelter where they're next. And then later, a property developer in Auckland who violated the RMA with such brazen disregard for anything anyone was trying to tell him. He's been sent to jail. Edward Gay has the latest on that coming up. But before it all, Katrina Batten with the headlines.
Nurses and district health boards are holding urgent pay talks in a last-bid effort to avoid this week's strike action. Nurses say they've already compromised and there's little scope left for that now. Talks began at 3 o'clock today and are scheduled to continue tomorrow ahead of a 24-hour strike from 9 o'clock on Thursday morning. The rescue operation to bring the remaining Thai boys out of the Tam Luang cave is about to resume. It's still not known whether divers will attempt to bring out all 5 people trapped or whether the boys' football coach will have to stay another night underground. For the first time, authorities have spoken about the condition of the boys rescued. They say they're in good health but will have to stay in hospital under observation for a week. The Auckland Council is facing legal action over its decision to ban 2 right-wing activists from Canada. The Mayor, Phil Goff, put a stop to Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux speaking at the Bruce Mason Centre, saying council venues should not be used to stir up ethnic or religious tensions. The Free Speech Coalition says Mr Goff's decision breached the Bill of Rights and the Human Rights Act, and it's taking the council to court. Samoa has halted all child vaccinations for mumps, measles and rubella as it investigates the sudden deaths of 2 infants who had been given the MMR injection. New Zealand's Immunisation Advisory Centre says the vaccine has been used safely here for decades and parents in this country should not be worried. An Auckland property developer who has cost ratepayers over $1 million in clean-up bills has been jailed after discharging sewage near a stream and using asbestos-contaminated landfill. Equo Lau, also known as Augustine Lau, is already serving a 2-month jail sentence for having native trees chopped down. Today he had 15 months added to his sentence after earlier admitting 27 breaches of the Resource Management Act and the Building Act. And a man who stole a human skull and bones from the Masonic Lodge in Nelson and said he would return them in exchange for meth has been sentenced to 9 months home detention. A skull and crossbones are Freemason symbols used in candidate initiations. And those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten.
I don't know if they're real skull and
No,
crossbones.
no. And why did he think the lodge would have the meth? That was just a confusing story. Could you explain all of that?
I cannot. I'm
Get
sorry.
back to us, KB. We need some answers. Let's turn to business news now with Matt Chatterton. Matt, I think you're doing a tremendous. Matt used to be a sports reporter, went off in his big OE and came back reinvented as a business reporter. You're taking to it like a duck to water, Matty. Retirement village operator Somerset Group is forecasting an underlying first half year profit despite a drop in sales. Explain that, young Matt.
Yeah, I'll try to explain that in plain English for you, John. It's forecasting an underlying profit of between $43 and $45 million for the first half of 2018. That's around a quarter of a quarter on what they had at the same period last year. Just some background on Somerset. It has about 5,000 residents in 23 retirement villages in New Zealand. They've got 7 more in development. Overall sales volumes were 299 for the first half of the year for these units at the retirement villages. That's actually down from 323, which I guess probably isn't considered too good for New Zealand's third largest retirement company. To break it down, new sales for units for the first half of the year were 145. That's compared to 179 for the same time last year, while resales were actually up slightly to 154 compared to 144. There are a couple of reasons as to why the new sales were down for the company. A number of sales staff actually left in the first half of the year, and Auckland's tight building market meant that some units took longer to complete. I did speak to the CEO, Julian Cook, today. He said the drop in sales was nothing to worry about and that he believes the company is still on track to hit all its targets for the year, including those 7 developments around the country, and I will note that 2 of those are in Auckland.
Thanks, Matt. Electronic card numbers for June showing that we are buying more this winter year on year, is that right?
Yeah, well, I don't know about you, but down here in Wellington, it's actually been quite cold, so I've actually needed to be rugging up with, the old scarf and the beanie.
Yeah.
I'm borrowing. Patrick O'Mara's here, so Patrick, I will be putting this back on your desk. Don't you worry about that.
But having said that, that's the use of a prop, Matt.
Yes,
I mean, this is just taking RNZ into the 21st century.
Oh, I'm always trying to expand and create new opportunities, so to speak, John. Consumer retail spending rose about 0.8% for June on May. The strongest gains were in consumables such as groceries and apparel, as I have here. However, I did speak to an economist today who said that the momentum was expected to slow for the rest of the year. That's due to a bit of a cooling in the housing market, so households are trying to save a bit more money and not planning on going out and spending. So that is expected to stay going down, I guess, for the rest of the year. And funnily enough, that was actually the pattern for the last 3 months. The trend has been going down over the last 3 months.
Right, thanks, Matty. What happened on the markets today?
Yeah, good point. Well, the NZX has closed down again today. It's sitting at 9,022. That's a 39-point drop. The US is trading at 68.4 cents. There's no real change there today. The Oz is up slightly. It's sitting at 91.6 cents. And the pound has weakened against the New Zealand dollar. Oh, that's just minutely though. It's up a bit to 51.7 pence. So not much of a change.
Thanks very much, Matt Chatterton, doing business for us out of Wellington this week. A lot of feedback coming in on nurses. One texter says, aren't the nurses getting a reasonably progressive offer, bearing in mind the teachers and other public service workers also lined up for increases with the limited ability of the government at present to fulfil all expectations? Another says $2.5 billion for defence. That was, of course, the P8s announced yesterday. Less than a fifth of that for nurses. Scrap the war toys. Without nurses, there's no one to protect. That's from Matt in Wellington. And Brian of Ngāmoto says, pay the nurses every cent they deserve more and move on to the teachers. Much better value than tax cuts. Thank you for your text. 2101 is the number, of course. Let's go to Japan now, where military personnel and search teams are digging through mud and debris as they continue to look for victims of the worst flooding the country has seen in a third of a century. Floods and landslides triggered by unprecedented rainfall have killed at least 140 people, and up to 60 are still missing. 100,000 people are preparing to spend another night in emergency shelters. The rains have been relentless, and some areas have seen as much as 58 centimetres. That's nearly 2 feet, an old school measurement of rain in 24 hours. The BBC's Andy Moore reports.
The worst of the rain has stopped, to be replaced by bright sunshine and temperatures up to 30 degrees Celsius. Rescue workers can now reach some areas previously cut off and start the grim task of recovering casualties. The death toll stands at more than 100, but scores of people are missing. Many of Japan's houses are wooden and no match for the tons of mud and rubble that came crashing down on top of them. The floodwaters are now receding, but dirty marks show how high the water reached. The Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has cancelled a planned trip to Europe and the Middle East. After a second meeting of the Government Emergency Committee, he said many people were still missing and the size of the rescue forces was being increased to 73,000 people. There may be floodwaters everywhere, but water to drink is in short supply. Many areas have had their supplies cut off and bottled water is running out. Thousands of people are also without power. More than 1 million people are still being told to stay away from their houses. But some people are beginning to return to the remains of their shattered homes. For some people, there will be no home to return to.
Andy Moore with that report. It's 19.5 to 6. We head now to a fairly unusual case in Auckland where a property developer who repeatedly and brazenly ignored the Resource Management Act has been sent to jail. Ikuo Lau, also known as Augustine Lau, was already serving a 2.5-month jail sentence for ordering native trees to be chopped down. Today he had 15 months added to his sentence after admitting 27 charges under both the Resource Management Act and the Building Act. The experienced Environment and District Court Judge Craig Thompson said when it came to ignoring council directions, Lau's offending was basically the worst of its kind. Our court reporter Edward Gay was in court and I asked him about the 6 different properties the case related to.
There was one in Flatbush on Ormiston Road. Originally had one house on it. Without resource consent, Lau converted that into 3 flats, that one house. The barn on the property, turned that into another two flats. And then he had 2 old classrooms moved onto the property and a weatherboard house. With a total, he got a total of 8 flats on the property. The rule said he was only allowed 1. 4 of the homes connected to the existing sewage system. That, of course, overloaded that system. And then Lau had his own system built as well, and that was completely inadequate. The sewage actually spilled out of that system and onto a slope just above a stream. The council moved, they had toilets moved onto the site for the tenants that were living in these flats. Lau continually was continually told by the council to get these tenants out. It wasn't safe, there were massive health problems. He actually at one point told the council workers that he was trying to fix Auckland's housing problem.
Right. Another way he was trying to fix Auckland's housing problem presumably was using asbestos-contaminated soil as fill on some of these properties?
That's right. One of these properties, he brought in contractors to level out, using landfill, level out a sort of platform for another building. This is in Otahuhu in South Auckland. He had 900 cubic metres of this landfill brought to the site. Again, no resource consent. Council continually issued notices to stop work. More fill was actually brought in after the council issued those notices. Some of that landfill, the council brought in contractors to have that landfill tested for, things like it was close to a waterway. They had geotech reports done on it and things. They actually tested that landfill and found it contained asbestos. That asbestos had been compacted into the site. Another property at Paremeremo Road, north of Auckland in Albany, that had a house on it that was converted into 3 flats. Garage was turned into another flat, and a relocated house was brought onto the property. That brought the total dwellings on that property to 9. And again, the local rules said only 1 house without resource consent. Again, more sewage leaks above a stream. And he also, on that property, he also cleared 1,000 square metres of native bush as well. A house in Mount Albert, again, another example, that was converted to 6 flats. No fire safety taken into account. Resource consent, had resource consent for a house and a single kitchen. In fact, there were 6 flats on this property. The council inspector who visited, at one point, Lau told that council inspector that actually the 5 tenants just shared one barbecue, but after a search warrant of that house, it showed that all the flats had separate kitchens.
This is kind of nutty stuff. The judge described it as gross offending. It's really unusual to see such a term of imprisonment for RMA offences, right?
It
but
is.
This guy was just taking the proverbial, wasn't he?
I mean, normally RMA offending, it's normally met with a fine. But, you know, Judge Craig Thompson said he needed to send a clear message, not just to Lau, but to others as well. He said the council had issued countless abatement and infringement notices to Lau. All of them had been ignored. He said Lau's offending was all for financial gain. The offending happened over years. It was premeditated. Judge Thompson said it was difficult to conceive of more serious offending in this area. Lau's already serving the sentence of 2 months and 2 weeks for having native trees chopped down on another property. He appealed that case actually to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal dismissed that appeal and actually said that if anything, a stronger sentence was justified. Lau's wife, Jian Wen Mao, also faces charges, lesser charges, but she is yet to file a full report into her financial situation, and Judge Thompson said that he wanted to see that financial report before he sentences her.
Our court reporter, Edward Gay, 27 admissions of guilt under the RMA and the Building Act. Fairly unusual for someone to get imprisonment in those circumstances, but he certainly wouldn't listen, I don't think, that chap. Right, lots of feedback coming in, including feedback on feedback. So somebody said, why are we spending money on war toys when in fact we could be putting that into settling the teachers and nurses' pay claims? Well, Ian has responded, we don't call them war toys when they're out in a storm searching for lost yachties or fisherfolk or patrolling the Great Southern Ocean for rogue whalers or fish poachers. That's in defence of the P8 purchase. Thank you, Ian. One texter says, I've always supported the nurses, but no longer. I think they should accept the offer. Another says nurses deserve a pay rise, but need to remember nurses in aged residential care who get paid much less than registered nurses and DHBs get now. And on the Brexit woes, Cameron's bluff was called by Farage. Cameron thought it was a referendum he could never lose. Boy, he did, didn't he? The mistake was allowing 2 years to pass before allowing the public. Another massive mistake to have the final say, the vote, that is. This is a disaster for the UK and will divide Europe. How ironic that Cameron and Farage have disappeared under their stones somewhere in suburbia. Yep, thank you very much indeed for your feedback. We really like hearing from you. A lobby group wants the Auckland Council to shut down several developments, saying they're killing a treasured marine reserve. More than 100 community members this morning presented the council with a report that's critical of work bordering the Long Bay Okura Marine Reserve north of Auckland. The report says construction waste is seriously damaging the reserve. Matthew Tunison reports.
The Long Bay Okura Great Park Society calls the marine reserve the jewel in the crown of Auckland's Hauriki Gulf, but it says it's experiencing death by 1,000 cuts. Numerous building developments nearby, including major earthworks at Long Bay and Waiti, are causing tons of soil and other sediment to pour into the fragile ecosystem. Society spokeswoman Fiona McLaughlin says wetlands have become clogged with a thick layer of sediment, which is thought to have led to the mass death of cockles earlier this year.
So the data and reports that we have collected show that extremely high levels of sedimentation and heavy metals are entering the marine reserve, and that it is causing serious harm to the marine and coastal ecologies, and that current sediment control systems are failing badly.
Fiona McLaughlin told the Environment and Community Committee that the council's own information shows as many as 92% of developments in the area have not been complying with their resource consents over the past 2 years. She says they need to be completely shut until better systems are put in place.
We are only suggesting that one because the issue is now at such a serious, state in the environment that we can't see any other solution there.
Shaw Mead of the environmental consultancy eCoast told the council the sediment retention and stormwater management systems don't work when there's more than 15 millimetres of rain in a 24-hour period.
What we do know, the normal stormwater and sediment treatments are not adequate to protect the Long Bay Okura Marine Reserve. We need higher standards, and the continued inputs are just going to lead to more and more stress and more impacts like the die-off of cockles we've seen.
Shaw Mead, who conducted a review of the sediment being pumped into the reserve, says there are many ways to make the retention better, and it could even be shored up to deal with a 100-year weather event. Councillor Penny Hulse, who chairs the Environment and Community Committee, says improving the reserve could pave the way for better management of sediment runoff throughout the Auckland region.
This almost feels a little bit like the canary in the coal mine. You know, this is saying, hang on a minute, let's just really have a look at what's going on.
The council says it will keep talking with the group and consider the issue again in August or September. For Checkpoint, call Matthew Tunis and Tēnei.
Coming up to 10 minutes to 6, the corrections head has contradicted statements made by senior government ministers in Parliament that a contract for the public-private partnership to build the new Waikeria prison was already in place when the government came to power. Ray Smith told MPs today while there were a number of agreements with the consortium the national government had been working with, the signing of the formal contract was still some months away. The coalition government has been under pressure to explain why it has proceeded with a $750 million PPP after Labor MPs vocally opposed using the private sector to build anything other than transport infrastructure. Last month there was this exchange in the House between Nationals' Amy Adams and Ministers David Clark and Andrew Little.
Does the Minister agree with Jacinda Ardern when she said that PPPs and corrections just don't work? And on that we've been very clear. And Phil Twyford, who said that PPPs for prisons would be a no-go for this government.
Mr Speaker, there is clear evidence around the government's prior experimentation with PPPs that they did not work. There are a number of perverse outcomes, and this government has steered clear thus far of any such foolishness.
Entry. So why is a PPP now being used to fund Waikeria prison when the use of PPPs for prisons has been clearly and repeatedly ruled out? Once Andrew tells you, yeah.
Well, I don't have the detail on that in front of me, but I understand they sold the contract. They signed the contract and it cost $34 million.
So that from the House. Our political editor, Jane Patterson, asked Ray Smith at what point the new government had to make the decision whether to proceed with or ditch the PPP.
Well, I think, Waikeria has been pretty well canvassed over, a good 6 months. So I think there's been, a wide-ranging discussion about the nature of the prison and kind of the size of the prison and the dimensions of it. And so, I think those other considerations are really ones for the government, not for me. My job was to provide the government with the best advice I could on how they could proceed.
So I'm not going to ask you to make any declaration on Andrew Little's comments, but where did the $34 million figure come from if the PPP agreements that were already in place had been ceased?
Oh, well, look, I think you'd need to talk to others about the comments they make. It's not really fair to ask me about that. But the reality is that when you're in a big development like this, with lots of people working on it, you accumulate a large amount of costs as the project proceeds, and everybody understands that. So particularly once you indicate that you're likely to proceed with a preferred bidder, and people are busy working on designs, and remember, people working on designs and rethinking the size of the prison and so on. So a lot of people are expending a lot of resources on the way through. So it's at some point, fortunately the project's gone ahead and looks in really good shape, and we're really confident about it. If the project had been cancelled altogether, there would have been a cost associated with it, but we're not in that position.
So did you have an assessment of that? Was there a point at which Correction said, right, we either go ahead with the arrangements in place looking towards a contract or we scrap it?
Oh, well, I think lots of assessments are made all the way along. I don't recall the exact ones, but all the way along when you're doing this, at any time when you're involved in a large commercial contract for a building contract such as this, you're always in negotiation and thinking about ways forward or whether plans will progress, and all parties that are involved in it know that. And all parties.
There was not one specific point where it was like, right, we have to make a decision given the new government.
Well,
we proceed or we break.
Look, all the way along, and right from the time. Actually, it was one of the early things the government had to pick up and talked about, and were quite open about the fact they wanted to kind of rethink it and consider it. And I think it's been a really good process. It's taken about 6 months. So all the way along, we're just considering the options and what they might be, and so are all of the parties that are involved in it.
Does $34 million sound about right to you?
Well, look, I'm not sure of the exact numbers in terms of what might have been committed in terms of resource, but these are very big and expensive projects, and the most important part about all of that is that as we're proceeding with the contract, all of the costs are rolled into kind of the design work that's been done to date, so we're really pleased about that.
Would it be fair to say, though, that the contract, so the agreement was at such a stage, you were so far into it, that there would have been, significant repercussions if the decision had been made to forego the PPP?
Well, look, there's risks for all of the parties involved when you're a long way into an arrangement like that. So they didn't materialise. So the reality is we have proceeded and we are getting close to having a contract, but we don't quite have one yet. There's a little ways to go yet.
That is Ray Smith, of course, Head of Corrections, talking to our political editor, Jane Patterson. The Justice Minister, Andrew Little, says he's not going to argue over semantics in relation to his comments in the House, saying there were signed agreements in place with the consortium, and he was advised the cost of breaking those agreements, along with the money that had already been spent, totalled up to $34 million. We're getting feedback on feedback on feedback. So somebody said, don't spend money on war toys, spend it on nurses and teachers. The next person said, yeah, but the war toys are essential if we need to do fisheries patrols or rescue missions in the South Pacific. Now, John Lawson has responded to that. Yes, we need sea rescue, etc. But a Boeing 737-800, on which the P-8s are based, only costs $100 million US. So 4 should cost 600 million New Zealand, roughly, not over 2 billion. The rest is for war toys and should be spent on nurses, teachers and other more useful essentials. We like you reacting to each other. Thank you very much indeed. It is about 4.5 minutes away from the news at 6. The Housing Minister has unveiled details of a plan to replace a Housing New Zealand high-rise in Auckland Central City with a new state-of-the-art housing unit. Plans to demolish the Grays Avenue high-rise, not far from us here at all, and replace it with 280 new units were announced in March. But today, Phil Twyford confirmed it's actually going ahead. 139 Grays Ave in central Auckland will be demolished next year and will be replaced by a brand spanking new unit for a mix of people across a range of incomes. Katie Scotch was at the announcement and she filed this report.
Housing Minister Phil Twyford stressed the need for quality housing to be provided for those sleeping rough in the country's biggest city.
If we're serious as a city and as a country about taking a compassionate approach for people who are in that situation, then it's vital for Auckland that we provide high quality housing here in the city centre. And so that's been a big part of the thinking behind this development.
While the overall cost of the project is still unknown, Housing New Zealand says a minimum of $100 million will come from its pocket, but the total cost could be more than $200 million. The complex will feature 280 apartments and on-site health and support services. Up to 80 of the new units will be allocated to homeless people living on the streets of Auckland, and the other 200 will be a mix of state housing and public rentals. Mr Twyford was confident the mix of state and private units wouldn't put people off living there.
It's a beautifully designed living environment right here in the central city, and there's a huge unmet demand for affordable, good quality accommodation. So I'm very confident that that mix will work fine.
139 Grays Ave isn't in great shape. The 87 units currently at the site are old and run down. The original emerald green letterboxes, installed when the building opened in 1957, still sit by the door. They're dented, rusting, hanging off walls, and the once polished paint is showing its age. The 2 elevators in the building creak and groan as they move up and down, and the custard paint outside the building is faded and grimy. Architecture commentator Jeremy Hansen says the state housing complex is a great old building and an important piece of New Zealand's architectural history, designed by government architect of the time, Gordon Wilson. But he's feeling divided about the decision to go ahead with plans to demolish the building.
This is a fantastic building that I believe should be a heritage structure by Gordon Wilson that's being torn down. But the mixed feelings are because this is exactly the kind of housing development Auckland and the rest of New Zealand needs a lot more of. So it's really difficult to oppose the provision of more good quality social housing.
Housing New Zealand says it considered this when finalising details for the site. But Scott Foley, a Housing New Zealand principal advisor for the new development, says it was an opportunity they couldn't miss.
To think that if we didn't redevelop this building, we couldn't house hundreds more people on this site would be a real shame.
So this was the only option then?
We looked at a couple of options, and to be able to build an extra couple of hundred units on this site and house lots more people who need housing in a way which really supports them to achieve goals that they set for themselves is a great opportunity.
The 60 tenants that live in the building were told yesterday of their home's ill fate. They have until the end of February next year to relocate and will have the option of moving back in once the new building is ready. Work on the development is expected to begin shortly and is set to be completed by the end of 2021. I tamaki Makoto mō te hōtaka o te ahi ko Katie Scotcher tēnei.
It's about 30 seconds before 6. We just got a fascinating piece of feedback in on Augustine Lau, the property developer who's been sent to jail for just basically treating the RMA like it was a piece of irrelevance. It's too long to read out before the news, so we'll bring it to you after 6. Also after 6, the latest on the nurses and their pay dispute, the latest from Thailand, and the BBC filing on Brexit, Boris Johnson and Theresa May. All of that coming up. But before it all, Katrina with the news at 6. And ladies and gentlemen, the Pips.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten aho. Rescuers have resumed a rescue operation for a third day to free 4 remaining boys and their soccer coach trapped in a cave in northern Thailand. Today's operation has been going on for 3 hours and involves 19 divers. The BBC's Sophie Long is at the cave complex.
It is day 3 of this high-risk operation. So far, it's been successful. 8 of the boys have been brought out safely and are now recovering in hospital. Today, it will be the turn of the final 4 and potentially their football coach as well. With their guides, they will now have to dive through the jagged, narrow passageways that lead the way back to the outside world. But it's raining here now. There have been heavy downpours overnight, and conditions here can change very quickly.
Sophie Long in northern Thailand. Meanwhile, health officials in Thailand say some of the 8 boys already rescued have received visits in hospitals from their families. They were only able to wave at the boys through the glass because of the risk of infection. The police have spoken to the widow of the late Awanui Black, who she accused of being a paedophile and the leader of a child sex ring. The allegations were made last Friday by Mrs Black in a video on Facebook. Detective Inspector Mark Loper says the police are urging anyone with information to come forward. He says the welfare and interests of any potential victims are a priority. A last-ditch attempt at averting a nationwide nurses' strike got underway in Wellington this afternoon after nurses rejected the latest pay offer and will walk off the job on Thursday. That led the Employment Relations Authority to order them back into talks. The top clinician at Wellington's Capital and Coast DHB said a nurses' strike will pose major challenges nationwide.
The strike could see the withdrawal of up to 70% of our frontline health workforce. In situations that are not life-threatening, care will take longer. DHBs and nurses have an obligation to preserve life and prevent disability, but we won't be able to provide the same care in the same way.
John Tate says it's estimated 6,000 to 8,000 elective procedures nationwide will need to be deferred because of the strike. The Auckland Council will be taken to court over the decision to ban 2 right-wing speakers from using council venues for a seminar next month. Last week, the Mayor, Phil Goff, said the venue should not be used to stir up ethnic or religious tensions and banned Canadian speakers Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux from using the Bruce Mason Centre. A crowdfunding effort run by the Free Speech Coalition has raised $50,000 in its first day. The coalition says it plans to use the money to bring judicial proceedings against the council. It says the move defends the rights of New Zealanders to express and hear controversial views. The head of corrections has told MPs the contract for the public-private partnership to build the new Waikaria prison is not yet in place. In June, senior ministers told Parliament the contract for the PPP had already been signed at a cost of $34 million. They were defending the decision to go ahead after campaigning hard against PPPs. Ray Smith today told MPs that agreements for design and initial work were in place, but the full contract is still some months away. Mr Smith says there would have been costs associated with pulling out.
Fortunately, the project's gone ahead and looks in really good shape, and we're really confident about it. If the project had been cancelled altogether, there would have been a cost associated with that, but we're not in that position.
Ray Smith. National says it's now clear the coalition government could have bailed out of the PPP if it really wanted to. A man has appeared in court after biting a police dog. The police say the 33-year-old man was due to appear in the New Plymouth District Court today on driving, dishonesty and violence charges. Eva Corlett reports.
The police say just before 10:30 last night, the man crashed into several parked cars in the suburb of Bell Block before breaking into a property and demanding keys. They say he then crashed and abandoned that car before demanding keys from 2 other people in their homes. A police dog was used to track him down. Detective Sergeant Gerard Bouteray says the man fought with the dog, slamming it into the ground and a concrete wall before biting it on its head. He says the dog is recovering well. The man was also injured and taken to hospital. Ko Eva Corlett, Tēnei.
It's 6:05. Sport. Belgium are in uncharted territory for their World Cup football semi-final with France, but believe their team spirit and togetherness can ensure their success will continue in Russia. Manager Roberto Martinez's team play 1998 World Cup winners in St. Petersburg tomorrow morning for a place in the final, marking the first time Belgium have reached this stage of the World Cup since 1986, when they finished 4th.
This is a unique opportunity for all the team and for the whole of Belgium, and for all the hard work that has been done. It gets even a more special opportunity to be in a semi-final facing France, with a real excitement about the big reward that this game is going to bring for one of the 2 nations.
The Croatia-England semi-final is on Thursday morning. Meanwhile, the New Zealand referee Matt Conga is in line to officiate in the World Cup final. Conga has been included on a list of just 12 referees for the final phase of the tournament. The White Ferns play England in the second one-day cricket international in Derby tonight, with the New Zealand women's team seeking to level the 3-match series at 1-1 after losing the opening game by 142 runs. LeBron James is officially a Laker. The NBA basketball star has put pen to paper on a 4-year deal, reportedly worth $220 million with the Los Angeles club. And the Auckland golfer Ryan Fox has risen to a career-high 87 in the world rankings following his second place at the Irish Open yesterday. Fox has risen 37 places. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, military history with Damien Fenton. Nick Bollinger samples the latest from Hamish Kilgar, and Trevor Recchi chats with a couple of heavy metal cellists from the Balkans.
What is interesting, Karen, as part of the justification for this new capability, is New Zealand's role in the Pacific, the response to climate change, those sorts of things. And to be perfectly honest with you, if you were going to create a defence force around things like that, you probably wouldn't necessarily go to replace the Orions with the P8.
That's Lately with Karen Hay, 10 p.m. weeknights on RNZ National.
Highly recommend those 2 cellists. Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Scattered showers, some heavy with hail, easing this afternoon. Isolated showers tomorrow. Whanganui to Wellington, mainly fine, however isolated showers tomorrow north of Wellington. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, a few showers today, mainly fine tomorrow. For Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine apart from a few showers in Canterbury tomorrow evening. Bulla and Westland, fine today apart from a few showers later in Bulla. Rain tomorrow with heavy and possibly thundery falls from afternoon. Fiordland, Southland and Otago. Today, showers south of the Otago Peninsula, fine elsewhere. A period of rain tomorrow with possible squally thunderstorms, then a few showers, then snow to 300 metres for a time. Terrible. And the Chatham Islands showers, some possibly heavy with hail, easing this evening and rain for a time tomorrow morning. It's just gone 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. This on Augustine Lau, the property developer who's been sent to jail for just repeatedly violating the RMA. Hi John, I used to work in resource consent compliance for Auckland Council. Whilst it's great to see a case like that of Augustine Lau's being prosecuted, suffice to say I'm familiar with the chap. This is the very worst level of offending which is almost guaranteed to result in a prosecution. However, a massive majority of breaches are subject only to a far lower level of enforcement. And any case which council does not feel certain it will win has little chance of being prosecuted as a result of cost. Not to mention that council consultants have found the Long Bay development to be largely compliant, I believe, yet to look at the damage that has resulted nonetheless. Major rethinking of environmental regulations is badly needed. Thank you for that feedback. We appreciate it. Nurses have gone against the wishes of their union. Well, their union negotiated the recommendations, of course, and voted to strike on Thursday for the first time in nearly 30 years. There's a desperate scramble to try to avoid the industrial action, with the union ordered by the Employment Relations Authority to go back into a type of negotiation with the DHBs. If the strike goes ahead, the country's hospitals will be down as much as 70% of their front-line health workers. Rowan Quinn spoke to nurses about which way they voted and why.
Shift work is really hard. It really takes over your entire life, and to not have our pay reflect that is a bit annoying.
Wellington nurse Kathleen with the briefest summary of why she wants a better deal. She voted to reject the latest pay offer from the DHB, effectively choosing to strike. She's confused about why the nurses' organisation negotiating team recommended they accept.
They obviously think that this is the best that we can get, or they're just a little bit over the whole process, which I wouldn't be surprised with. I think a lot of nurses are a bit over the whole thing.
This Canterbury nurse voted to accept the offer and not to go on strike. She's happy with what's on the table and says so are most of those she works with. The woman, who didn't want to be identified, says the offer is fair and she has other reservations about striking.
It's actually incredibly expensive to strike, but also I worry about the safety of patients and then also the nurses who are going to be looking after them. That puts a huge amount of pressure on the resource that's left as well.
Nurse Danny Wilkinson's openly critical of the union team, saying it's not acting in the best interests of members. She started her own movement, NZ Nightingales, and wants the union to take a harder line, saying the negotiations are about much more than the next few years' pay rates.
We're standing firm, not just because we want more money to go buy more shoes and to go on holiday and things like that, but because we really see the bigger picture, that if this isn't addressed, it's going to get worse. And it's going to get to a point where it's unfixable. So we want to fix it while we still can.
Other nurses spoken to by RNZ say they are keen to strike, but feel for some of their colleagues who are reluctant to because of worries about patient safety. And while there may be divisions over the strike, Kathleen from Wellington says it's not causing tension.
I can see people's point of view when they want to accept it, and then I talk to other people when they want to reject, and I'm like, yeah, I get that too. So everyone's very understanding, and they're all very happy, and everyone's very open about which way they're voting.
DHBs say if the strike goes ahead, backup plans will be put in place, including asking family members to help patients. The nurses are scheduled to walk off the job at 7 o'clock on Thursday morning. For Checkpoint, Rowan Quinn, DNA.
Coming up to 6:12, let's go back to Thailand, and a third and hopefully final rescue attempt is underway as we speak to bring out the remaining 4 boys and their coach from those caves still trapped in the flooded cave complex. The head of the rescue mission says all 5 will be brought out at the same time. 4 boys were freed last night, joining the first 4 to have been rescued, who are all in a hospital in Chiang Rai. Officials say the 8 are in good mental and physical health. Remarkable, really, all things considered. 2 have been treated for lung inflammation, and some had low temperatures when they were first taken to hospital, but they've all now recovered. The BBC's Lucy Williamson filed this report on the rescue mission's second successful day.
Police helicopters over Chiang Rai have come to signal hope. Inside this one, a 5th boy, pulled today from deep inside the mountain and flown to join his teammates in hospital. His identity kept private, even as his arrival here makes global news. A week ago, this mission was seen as almost impossibly risky, but with every success, confidence in the team here has grown, as the monsoon rains have so far largely held off.
About a week, and they're working on it.
Ivan was one of the rescuers in the cave that first day, stationed near one of the route's most difficult parts to replace the divers' empty tanks, help guide the boys through and deal with problems.
I was very scared because when I saw the diver and the kid in the horizon, we can't see that far, but maybe about 50 meters, I still didn't know if it was a casualty or if it was a kid. So I was very scared. It didn't feel good. But when I saw that he was alive and breathing and seemed to be all right, yeah, it felt very good. It felt very good, yeah.
What did you learn from that first day?
Well, one of the very difficult things in the cave is communication. Talking inside the cave is very difficult. You need to be very close. If you're more than just 5-10 meters away, the echo and the water and everything, it's incredibly hard to understand. And misunderstandings and high complexity that leads to very bad situations. So we need, and we plan for that, we need to keep the communication very simple.
Thai children are warned about this mountain by their grandparents, that it swallows people and doesn't let them out. So far, this operation has proved that adage wrong. 8 children have been counted out of its caves. 4 more are waiting with their coach for their rescuers to return. The battle with this mountain is being won through careful planning and tight control, but it's also relying on a sense of unity among the country, the divers and the boys themselves.
Lucy Williamson there from the BBC, of course. So all eyes are now on those remaining 4 boys and their coach. The 25-year-old coach, of course, is the one who led the team into the cave for an adventure, or let them go into the cave for an adventure, which turned misadventure after soccer practice 18 days ago. CNN's Michael Holmes has more on the man the boys know as Coach Eck.
Looking back at the faces of the dozen boys trapped in a Thai cave, one man was with them since the start. 25-year-old assistant coach Ekapol Chantawong. A former monk, Thai social media is divided over his role, some praising his efforts to protect the boys after reports emerged of him giving up his shares of food. Others criticising him for taking them into the cave in the first place. The coach's family says, despite the circumstances, the kids have been in the best possible hands.
Coach Eck, he loves those kids very much. Then kids prefer to go out with him whenever their coach invited to go. Children's mother trusts him that he can take care of their child pretty well.
Reports say the coach kept the boys' spirits up in the dark days before they were found. His aunt describes how he too endured his own hardships as a young man.
His father had passed away when he was 10 years old. After that, he went to the temple to become the novice monk.
Coach Eck himself said he would look after the boys. In a letter he wrote from inside the cave, carried out by divers, he apologised to the family, saying, "I promise I will take care of the children the best I can. Thank you for your support. I'm really sorry," to the parents. The parents responded with a letter of their own, saying they don't blame him and look forward to the day that all the boys, including their coach, will be rescued. That could be within days, and Coach Eck made one special request for his return, writing, "Please tell grandmother to make a vegetable drink and crispy pork when I get out. I will go and eat it." A slice of home for the man who was the closest thing to family for 12 boys away from their own.
Lovely piece of feedback from Angela about the coach. Hi, John. Regarding the coach and boys trapped in Thailand, my thoughts have been with the coach. As he cared for these lads, he's done an amazing job of caring for them and keeping their spirits up for all these days in pitch dark with no knowing if they would ever be found. He's a hero, I feel, as well as so many others in the rescue team, even though the initial decision to enter the caves was not a wise one. Nice feedback. Thank you, Angela. Let's go to London now. Let's go back to London. We've already been there once tonight, but by golly, this is a fascinating story, and by any stretch, it was a nutty old day in British politics. Yesterday, Theresa May's Brexit Secretary David Davis resigned, declaring the UK's current strategy on Brexit to be unworkable. Basically, he just thinks it's too soft. Soft is too soft. He was swiftly followed by the junior Brexit minister, and today, Chief Brexiteer Boris Johnson. The UK Foreign Minister also bailed out on his leader. Many people are questioning his motives for doing that. In the Guardian's case, they are doing so in no uncertain terms. Theresa May's leadership is now seriously in question amid a shambles over Brexit that even the harshest critics didn't predict. This from the BBC's political editor, Laura Koonsberg.
For Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister's plan stays too close to the EU.
He said the Brexit dream is dying, suffocated by needless self-doubt. We appear to be heading for a semi-Brexit. Explaining his resignation, he said the government now has a song to sing. I've practiced the words over the weekend and find they stick in the throat. But in an acid response from the Prime Minister, she wrote, I am sorry and a little surprised to receive it after the productive discussions we had at Chequers. If you are not able to provide the support we need, it is right you should step down. Just on Friday, she had trumpeted her Brexit compromise, number 10 designed and the Cabinet approved. Were they cheering or jeering her?
Mr. Speaker, on Friday at Chequers, the Cabinet agreed a comprehensive and ambitious proposal that provides a responsible and credible basis for progressing negotiations with the EU towards a new relationship after we leave on the 29th of March next year. In the 2 years since the referendum, we have had a spirited national debate with robust views echoing around the Cabinet table as they have on breakfast tables up and down the country.
For Labour, a time to make the Prime Minister squirm.
For the good of this country and its people, the government needs to get its act together and do it quickly. And if it can't, make way for those who can.
More pressing than intense pressure from the opposition from the two sides of the Brexit debate.
I don't care what you think. If it's outrageous, it's outrageous.
Rearguard action from the Tory benches. Brexiteers furious with the Prime Minister's Chequers compromise.
This week, the activists were so disappointed about what had happened at Chequers. They were betrayed. They said they were betrayed.
This is not a betrayal. I believe, though, that is what people voted for when they voted to leave, and we will deliver in faith with the British people.
It already feels like weeks ago, but after a late-night call where he quit too, David Davis explained this morning the root of Theresa May's problem. Many Brexiteers think her compromise doesn't mean Brexit at all.
I'm worried that what the European Union will do is simply take what we've offered and ask for more or wait for more.
If we carry on with this plan and leave on those terms, is that really leaving at all?
I don't think so. But, you know, as I said in my letter, I hope she's right and I'm wrong. We'll see. It'll be down to the fine detail, that's the thing.
But is the balance in the Tory party tonight with loyalists like Jeremy Hunt, who is the new Foreign Secretary, or with Brexiteers staying on despite reservations, or rebels with little interest in accepting Downing Street's compromise and no intention of playing nice?
The BBC's Laura Koonsberg. The Auckland Council looks set to be taken to court over its decision to ban 2 right-wing speakers from using a council venue for a seminar next month. The speakers, Lawrence Southern and Stefan Molyneux, from Canada, the venue, the Bruce Mason Centre in Takapuna. The Mayor Phil Goff said council venues should not be used for events that stir up ethnic or racial or religious tensions. The campaign run by the Free Speech Coalition has now raised $50,000 in 24 hours to bring judicial proceedings against the council. Coalition spokesperson David Cuman told our reporter Emma Hatton the case would set a precedent in defending the rights of New Zealanders to express and hear controversial views.
We were very concerned about the decision that Auckland Mayor Phil Goff made in essentially banning 2 people from speaking based on political opinion. I think that's an extremely dangerous precedent and undermines our tolerant liberal democracy.
And so what was the purpose of the campaign?
So the idea was to try and raise a minimum of $50,000 in order to obtain legal proceedings to get an injunction and try and appeal to the Bill of Rights Act and the Human Rights Act so that we can overturn Mayor Goff's decision.
Did you go to Phil Goff before you started this campaign just to see if you could, talk it through before it had to go this far?
I personally tweeted and emailed him, but I didn't get a response. I'm not sure about the others. I'm not sure about the coalition as a coalition. But really, time was of the essence. And with these people due to arrive next month, something quick needed to happen.
Are you hopeful that the Bruce Mason Centre will be made available to this pair again?
I certainly hope so. Look, the $50,000 has been raised, and so we will start the legal proceedings. I certainly hope that the Bruce Mason Centre will be available to the speakers. I think regardless of what political opinion you have, your freedom to voice that opinion, particularly in a public venue, is really a cornerstone of our freedom and our democracy. And for Mayor Goff to undermine that is a real travesty and needs to be fought.
If he now allows them to speak, will you continue with this, or will you drop it?
No, I think this is an important case, test case. So we'll continue to make sure that this is followed through. It's a really important case, I think, for our freedom of speech and for our democracy.
Just a point of clarification there, in case it wasn't clear enough in the intro. It is the venue that they have been banned from using. It was a council venue as opposed to their presence in New Zealand per se. The Auckland Council has not been available for comment on that so far. Speaking of the Auckland Council, gosh, we've received a lot of feedback on Augustine Lau. Edward Gay was telling us earlier in the program that he's been sent to jail. Unusual for people who violate the RMA to be sent to jail, and we talked about that. We have just been hearing from so many people who say, yep, he should have been sent to jail ages ago, and why did it take the council so long? This is probably the most striking example of it. It's an email from Louise. Hi John, Augustine Lau ran an illegal boarding house next door to us in Mount Eden during the winter of 2001 and into 2002. Up to 12 people were living in a 2-bedroom bungalow which he'd carved up inside into at least 4 units, illegally of course. There was coming and going, shouting, drunkenness, plus ongoing building work at all hours of the day and night. We had a new baby and it was hell. But the council was completely unhelpful, despite me phoning them in tears of desperation almost every day. The view from my then toddler's son bedroom to the driveway next door took in rotten meat and used sanitary items that littered it regularly. Eventually, to our huge relief, the house was sold and renovated back to its original form. I'm glad he's in jail now. I just wish the council had taken our nightmare seriously at the time. Louise says that, and she's not alone in giving us feedback along those lines about this character. We might try to talk to the council about that. It's 6:25. Thank you for your feedback, all of you. Donald Trump has announced Judge Brett Kavanaugh as his nominee, for the US Supreme Court. The 53-year-old served with the George W. Bush administration, also worked as a lawyer in the Kenneth Starr investigation of President Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. Kavanaugh is favoured by many conservatives, has served on the Washington, D.C. Circuit Court since 2006. He's a graduate of Yale, currently lectures in law at Harvard. He's previously argued sitting presidents should effectively face a form of immunity from criminal prosecution. Lots of people saying that will have endeared him to Trump. This report from CNN.
I will nominate Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the United States Supreme Court.
The president touting his pick to replace Justice Anthony Kennedy, a conservative and often key swing vote on the high court.
Judge Kavanaugh has impeccable credentials, unsurpassed qualifications, and a proven commitment to equal justice under the law.
Judge Brett Kavanaugh thanking the president and vowing to protect the Constitution.
If confirmed by the Senate, I will keep an open mind in every case.
Kavanaugh, a law professor and judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, was accompanied by his wife and daughters. He highlighted his commitment to the law, his religion, and equality for all Americans.
My judicial philosophy is straightforward. A judge must be independent and must interpret the law, not make the law.
Democrats voicing strong opposition even before the choice was public. At the heart of their concerns that the president's pick would undermine Roe v. Wade, the landmark 1973 ruling that upheld a legal right to an abortion. The Affordable Care Act could also be on the line.
These two rights, affordable health care and a woman's freedom to make sensitive health care decisions, hang in the balance with this nominee.
But the president pushing for a confirmation despite the opposition.
That report from CNN. Judge Kavanaugh needs to be confirmed by Senate before taking up that post on the Supreme Court. At 53 and looking pretty good for his age, he could be on the Supreme Court for decades. Here's an oddie from Switzerland. Babies conceived in the winter are more likely to become skinny adults than those conceived in warmer summer months. Scientists in Switzerland, who seem to have nothing better to do, have linked cold weather conception to large amounts of fat-burning tissue in both mice and humans. The BBC's Oliver Conway reports.
According to this study, babies conceived in the heat of summer may face a lifelong battle to lose weight, while their winter counterparts are more likely to be naturally slim. It's all down to how much active brown fat a person has. That's the tissue that burns up calories, and the researchers found that people conceived in colder months had more of it. In a separate study on mice, they showed the differences were linked to the temperature of the father. Professor Christian Wolfram carried out the research.
This is exclusively transmitted through the male lineage. So females in cold don't help. So it's clearly transmitted via the sperm. And the effect size is quite substantial. So these mice that are born to cold-exposed fathers are protected from obesity. And even though they eat more, they don't gain as much weight when you challenge them with an unhealthy high-fat diet.
Men hoping that a quick ice bath could help them produce a skinny child may be disappointed, however, as the exposure to the cold needs to persist over a sustained period.
No one was thinking about having an ice bath. Oliver Conway from the BBC. No one. That's Checkpoint for tonight. Boy, we've received a lot of feedback on nurses. Very disappointed with the nurses' strike action. I think they're now being greedy and naive. I've supported them to date, but no more. There are lots of areas that need attention. The government cannot fix them all at once, says Steve from Nelson. All nurses and other frontline essential staff like fire, police, etc. should get tax relief to increase their take-home pay. I'm going to cough, so let's have the theme. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Round 3 of the Tide Cave rescue is underway. Urgent talks to avoid a nationwide nurses' strike have been taking place in Wellington after nurses rejected the latest pay offer. The police have spoken to the widow of the late Awanui Black, who she has accused of being a paedophile and the leader of a child sex ring. Samoa has halted all child vaccinations for mumps, measles and rubella as it investigates the sudden deaths of 2 infants who had been given the injection. An Auckland property developer whose environmentally damaging work cost ratepayers $1 million in clean-up costs has been jailed for longer. The Free Speech Coalition is taking the Auckland Council to court over its ban on 2 right-wing Canadian activists. And a man has appeared in court after biting a police dog while resisting arrest. Our next news and weather is at 7.